When I saw my own body lying on the road, I realized the nightmare wasn't what was coming. It was what I was already living. Before starting the report, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Write in the comments what time this video arrived for you. Now, enjoy your favorite horror session. I never paid much attention to those haunted road stories. My dad always said fear was for people with a guilty conscience. And my grandma, with her small-town faith, used to repeat, "If you've done nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear." I grew up believing that. I've been a rideshare driver for almost 2 years now, and by then, I'd seen it all during late nights in Bakersfield, California. Drunk passengers, people crying in the back seat, couples fighting, even a failed robbery attempt, but never anything that really messed with my head. Not until Highway 33. The first pickup happened on a Friday, almost 3 a.m., middle of nowhere. A poorly lit shoulder between mile markers 12 and 13 on Highway 33. Not a stretch I usually covered, but the fare was good. When I pulled over, the passenger was already standing there, right by the roadside, like he knew exactly when I'd arrive. Tall, thin, skin so pale it looked almost gray. Black suit, like someone headed to a funeral. Didn't say much, just got in the back seat and whispered with a raspy voice, "City Cemetery." I didn't question it, just started the car and drove. What struck me was the smell, like wet soil mixed with iron. But I told myself it was just in my head. When we got there, I turned around to let him know we'd arrived, and the back seat was empty. I gave a nervous laugh. Maybe he'd gotten out while I was maneuvering. I checked the car, the mirrors, the passenger seat. Nothing. That bitter confusion stayed in my mouth, but I moved on. Just exhaustion, I told myself. Too many sleepless nights, too much coffee, too little imagination. The second time, 2 weeks later, same spot, same time, same man, same destination. This time during the ride, I tried making small talk. Asked if he lived nearby, if he worked late too. But all I got was silence, an uncomfortable, heavy silence. Through the rearview mirror, I could see his eyes. They looked too sunken, like they had no color at all. We reached the cemetery, and once again, empty back seat. After that, I started avoiding driving that late, declined every ride request near Highway 33. But the third time, I didn't have a choice. The app crashed, literally. No signal anywhere in the whole city, except for that 5-mile stretch around Highway 33. And guess what? Only one request popped up on the screen. Highway 33, mile 12. That time driving there, something weird started coming through the radio. Not music, not normal static. It sounded like breathing, slow, heavy, like someone right next to the mic. I parked, headlights illuminating the same shoulder, and he was already there, waiting, like always. When he got in, something caught my eye for the first time. His hand, fingers caked with dirt, like he'd been digging something. My throat tightened, but I drove. And on the way, while the radio kept crackling, a word came through, low and almost swallowed by the static, but clear enough to freeze my blood. "Now!" I glanced at the mirror, heart racing, his eyes staring straight at me. That's when I started thinking. This wasn't just exhaustion or some sick prank. No matter how much I tried to rationalize, one question started to grow inside me, like a tumor. Why always me? Why only me? And worse, why did I feel like I already knew this man? From somewhere, that question started to hammer in my mind, day and night. Who was he? Why only me? And why? Why this cursed deja vu every time I stopped at that shoulder? I started sleeping badly. Nightmares of headlights cutting through Highway 33's fog, the smell of wet dirt, and the sound of something being dragged across asphalt. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, with his breathing still echoing in my ears. I told my mom, she's the type to solve everything with prayers and sage. Told me to put a glass of water behind the door, light a candle, and say a protection prayer before leaving for work. These things feed on fear, son, she said. But the truth? Fear had already become part of me. Even after avoiding the app for days, when I finally decided to work again, guess what the first ride request was? Didn't even need to see the full address. Just one glimpse. Highway 33. I almost declined, but for some reason I couldn't explain. I accepted. Like something inside me already knew that if I didn't go, he'd find me somewhere else. That night I grabbed the car and went. On the way, I saw more signs. The radio was pure static now, no matter the station. The GPS froze with only one destination. City Cemetery. Even though I hadn't typed anything. And worse, the streetlights along the road started going out one by one, swallowed by darkness as I drove past. When I reached the spot, there he was. Same suit, same pale face. But this time, there was something new. On his shirt, a stain. Dark, dry, like blood. I swallowed hard. City Cemetery? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded, silent, and I drove. Halfway through, that sound started again. But it wasn't from the radio anymore. It was coming from inside the car, a dragging noise, like something scraping underneath the back seat. I looked at the rearview mirror, and for the first time, he wasn't sitting upright. He was leaning forward, way too close to my neck, as if he wanted to whisper something. My heart was in my throat. I tried focusing on the road, but something made me look again. And that's when I noticed. His face wasn't the same anymore. The skin looked grayer than ever. The eyes completely clouded, like frosted glass. And his mouth almost seemed like it wanted to open, but it was almost stitched shut, the corners torn, showing part of his teeth. I floored the gas, desperate to end that ride. When I reached the cemetery, I slammed on the brakes, turned around, ready to throw him out. And of course, the back seat was empty. But this time, something stayed behind. On the seat, there was a driver's license. Hands shaking, I picked it up. The name printed there made my stomach turn. Bruno Andrews. Date of death, June 19th, 2020. My name, the same name on my own documents. I dropped the license like it was burning me, jumped out of the car, gasping for air, trying to understand. My heart was pounding. Then, I heard it, behind me. The rear door, slowly creaking open. I whipped around, but no one was there. I jumped back in, started the engine, and sped off like crazy. I just wanted to get home, lock my bedroom door, and pretend none of this happened. But then, I realized, no matter how much I drove, I kept ending up in the same place. Highway 33, I took turns, different exits, drove through neighborhoods I knew by heart, but every time I blinked, there it was again. That empty shoulder, overgrown weeds on the side, the same winding curve. I tried turning off the car. Nothing. Tried running on foot, but the road twisted around me, like a circle. And that's when the radio stopped crackling. There was 3 seconds of absolute silence before a deep, dragged voice came through, like it was coming from inside the speakers themselves. Now, it's your turn. The smell of dirt grew stronger. The air thickened inside the car. My eyes burned. And when I looked ahead, down the road, for the first time, I saw something that truly froze my blood. A body lying right in the middle of the road, face turned towards me. The face was mine. I froze, hands trembling on the wheel, engine growling like a trapped animal. The body on the road, my body, same jacket as always, same cap, same faded rideshare t-shirt, eyes wide open, staring straight into my soul. I tried blinking, telling myself it was a hallucination, just my exhausted mind playing tricks. But no, the rear-view mirror still showed the back seat empty, and the radio now let out a low, vibrating hum, like the air itself was shaking inside the car. My breath started failing, sweat dripping down my face, and then without being able to control it. I felt my foot slam down on the accelerator. The car lunged forward, straight at the body. I screamed, a scream that tore my throat. Tried yanking the wheel, slamming the brakes, anything. But it was like my hands weren't mine anymore, like my fingers wouldn't obey. The scene went slow motion, headlights lighting up my own face on the asphalt, those dead glassy eyes, the imminent impact. But before it hit, everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I was parked, same shoulder on Highway 33, car off, absolute silence. I looked around, no sign of anybody on the road, no scratch on the hood. For a second, I thought I had dreamed it all, a nightmare, inside another. But then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, hands still shaking. A new ride notification. Pickup location, Highway 33, mile 12. Destination, City Cemetery. Passenger, Bruno Andrews. My own name. Again. My throat went dry. My stomach twisted. Almost involuntarily, I opened my trip history, started scrolling, and that's when the ground felt like it disappeared beneath me. For the past 2 months, every single late-night trip had the same log. Highway 33 to City Cemetery. Always the same passenger, Bruno Andrews. Like, I was the only driver on that road. Like I'd been running this road, over and over, an endless loop. The blood drained from my face, but I still didn't get why. That's when the memory hit, like a wave crashing inside my head. 5 years earlier, June 2020, I was still new to the app, driving extra shifts for money. I remember driving that rainy night, poor visibility, and then a shadow crossing the road, a man in a suit. I tried to brake, but it was too late. The impact, the sound of bones breaking, the body rolling across the asphalt. I panicked, didn't stop, just drove away. Night after night, I convinced myself maybe it hadn't really happened. No news, no investigation. I hid behind hope that no one had seen me. Bit by bit, I buried it somewhere deep inside my mind. But now, it all came back. The man in the suit, the pale passenger. It was him, the man I killed. The radio switched on by itself. The static faded until it became a voice I knew, because it was mine. It was you, always you. I looked in the rearview mirror. This time, the back seat wasn't empty. The man, now more vivid than ever, eyes locked on mine. And then, he smiled. A smile that tore with pain and rage at the same time. And for the first time, he said something beyond the destination. We trade places now. Before I could react, the seatbelt yanked me back with brutal force. The air vanished from my lungs. The car lights flickered like a short circuit eating through everything. My fingers went numb, my legs heavy, vision blurry. When I opened my eyes again, I was no longer in the driver's seat. I was in the back. I looked forward, desperate. Another driver, someone I'd never seen before, now had the wheel. Young, distracted, like he didn't even notice me. He checked his phone, accepted the ride, and there it was, Highway 33 to City Cemetery. I tried screaming, pounding the seat, but nothing. My voice wouldn't come out. All I could do was watch, helpless, as the car pulled away again, back onto the road, repeating it all one more time. And that's when I understood. That question that had haunted me from the start, eating me alive, why always me? The answer was simple, because now I was the passenger. Are you enjoying the video? Leave your comment. Your support is very important to the channel. Now let's move on to the next report. If I had known what that road had in store for me that night, I would have hit the gas and never looked back. But curiosity is a curse you only understand when it's too late. My life had always been ruled by logic. I grew up in a family that didn't leave room for ghost stories. My parents were the kind who called anything unexplainable nonsense. My grandfather, the only one who seemed to believe in the unseen, had a phrase I never paid much attention to until that day. There are things we can't see, but that can see us. The storm started out of nowhere. Lightning split the sky with almost mechanical frequency, like the universe had entered some endless loop of anger. I was driving back from a nearby town after a frustrating weekend. Went to visit a friend who canceled everything last minute. The radio just crackled with static, and the windshield wipers fought hopelessly against the pounding rain. That's when I saw her, standing by the side of the road just after a sharp curve. A woman, thin, long, soaked hair, wearing a pale dress that clung to her body from the rain. She stood there, arms stretched out, asking for a ride. My heart jumped. It's not exactly the kind of thing you expect to see on a rural highway in the middle of the night during a storm, but there was something in her eyes, an emptiness, or maybe desperation, that made me stop the car. She got in without saying a word, just sat in the passenger seat and crossed her arms like the cold was the least of her problems. I tried making conversation, asked if she was okay, if she wanted to be dropped off somewhere specific. Nothing. She just stared at the windshield like she could see something beyond the curtain of rain. For a few long minutes, the only sounds were the engine and the rain pounding on the roof. I noticed the air inside the car getting heavier, like the oxygen had thickened. That's when we got close to the bridge. Until then, she hadn't moved an inch. But suddenly she lifted her arm and pointed towards the river below. And then she said, with a voice that sounded like it came from a place far, far away, "That's where I died." Instinctively, I turned my head to look at her, but the passenger seat was dry. No water stains, not a single drop. My stomach twisted, my chest locked up. For a second, I thought my brain was playing tricks on me. I blinked, looked again, nothing. Like she'd never been there. I pulled over to the shoulder, completely in shock. But when I looked outside, she wasn't there either. I sat there for a few seconds, hands shaking on the wheel, trying to process what had just happened. The rain was still pouring, and the bridge ahead looked like a dark portal leading to something I didn't want to face. My first impulse was to start the car and get the hell out of there as fast as possible. But one thought kept pounding in my head. How did she disappear? I saw her get in, saw her sit down, heard her voice. It happened. This wasn't just imagination. Fear fought with logic, and I'd been raised to trust logic. Maybe she ran off while I was distracted. Maybe she slipped into the woods. Maybe. I took a deep breath, grabbed my phone, and turned on the flashlight. Got out of the car, my sneakers sinking into the mud, my clothes getting just as soaked as hers had been minutes earlier. I walked to the edge of the bridge, looked down at the river, dark churning water, branches and debris rushing with the current. Nothing. No sign of anyone. Back in the car, the passenger seat remained as dry as the desert. Not a single hair, not a single crease in the leather, like she'd never existed. I drove back like a maniac, hands freezing, heart pounding wildly. With every lightning flash that lit up the road, my eyes shot straight to the seat next to me, expecting, I don't know, to see her again. When I finally got home in Columbus, Ohio, I tossed my keys on the table and went straight to the bathroom. Stared at myself in the mirror. Pale, eyes wide, like I'd aged 5 years in one night. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, her voice echoed in my head. That's where I died. The next morning, the sky was clear, a cruel contrast to the night before. The road looked different, almost welcoming under the sun, but the weight in my chest stayed the same. Anxiety, heaviness. One question eating away at me. Who was she? I got back in the car like some part of me needed answers. Drove the same road, eyes scanning every inch. When I reached the bridge, I pulled over and got out. That's when I saw it. On the other side of the guardrail, half buried in the weeds, stood a wooden cross. Weathered, crooked, but still standing. There were wilted flowers at its base, and pinned to it under a faded piece of plastic, a small photo. My heart stopped. It was her, the same woman who got in my car. I dropped to my knees as if my legs couldn't hold me anymore. Beneath the photo, a name, Emily Carter, and a date, June 19th, 2015, exactly 10 years ago. Same day, same night, same storm. I stared at it, trying to connect pieces that didn't make sense. I remembered the stories my grandfather used to tell when I was a kid. He always said there are places that stay marked, where time gets stuck like an echo, where people who die violently, unfairly, can't really leave. Back then, I laughed. Now, that laugh felt like a knot in my throat. And just when I thought the universe was done pushing me deeper into this nightmare, I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around. But of course, no one. Or at least, that's what I wanted to believe. But before I left, before I even got the key back in the ignition, I noticed something that froze me to the core. On the inside of my car window, there were marks, like wet fingers had dragged down the glass. 4 long streaks, slowly descending, like someone had slid their hand from the roof to the door handle. For a few seconds, I just stood there next to the car, staring at those marks like they were the only thing that existed. My legs shook, my breathing turned shallow, and every fiber in me screamed to leave. But you ever get that feeling that if you don't understand what's happening, it'll follow you forever? That's exactly what kept me there. I opened the door slowly, got inside like I expected to find her in the passenger seat, but it was empty. I touched the seat, still dry, and those marks on the glass, still there, on the inside. I started the car, but instead of driving straight home, I went to the nearest town, a small place called Millersburg. Pulled into an old rusty gas station where an older man worked behind the counter with a tired smile. I asked him straight, "Do you know anyone named Emily Carter?" He went silent for a moment, the smile fading like I just said something forbidden. "Yeah," he said, lowering his voice. "It's been 10 years since she died. Right there at that bridge." I already knew, but hearing it out loud made my throat close. How did she die?" I asked, almost whispering. The man scratched his head, glanced around like he wanted to make sure no one else was listening. "They say she was driving back from a party in town. Stormy night, lost control and went off the bridge into the river. They never found her body, just the car. Days later, stuck downstream. Ever since, every year, same night, people say they see a woman on the road, asking for a ride." He paused for a few seconds, looking me dead in the eye. "And the ones who stop, well, what happened to you happens to them." My mouth went dry. "What do you mean?" He sighed like he'd told the story more times than he wanted to. "It's always the same. She gets in, silent, until the bridge. Then she points to the river, says the same thing, and disappears." My stomach twisted into a knot. Every single detail matched what I'd lived. "But why?" I asked, unable to hide the desperation in my voice. "Why does she do this? Why me?" The man gave a sad half smile. "Maybe she just wants someone to know she's still there." I drove home like I was carrying a weight. Didn't sleep that night. Or the next. The marks on the car window stayed, like scars from a moment I'd never erase. In the following days, curiosity turned into obsession. I spent hours digging through old news articles, found newspaper clippings with her picture, reports about the search in the river, testimonies from friends, all describing Emily as a bright, happy girl who vanished on a stormy night. I even went to her old house, talked to her mother, a woman with lost eyes who still left the porch light on every night, waiting. And then, in the middle of another sleepless night, sitting in my living room with the TV playing low just to break the silence, my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You saw me." My body froze. I opened the message, reread it, and before I could react, another one came. "Now you know." I stood up slowly, like any sudden move could trigger something I couldn't control. Walked to the window and looked out at the street. No one there. But then, almost like a whisper inside my own head, I understood. She didn't want to scare me, didn't want to hurt me. She just wanted to be seen, remembered, to have her story told again. 10 years trapped between the moment of her death and the fading memories of people. The cycle had repeated with so many others. But this time, it felt like she'd chosen someone who would actually listen. Someone who wouldn't just forget. In the end, all she wanted was for someone to finally know that on that bridge, on that night, in that storm, she never left. Before we move on to the next story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It's a pleasure to have you here. Now enjoy the moment listening to the next story. I always thought fear was just a kid thing. Fear of the dark, of ghosts, of things you can't see. My grandfather used to say, if you work at night, you better make friends with the shadows, because the city changes after the last store closes and the streetlights grow sparse. I grew up with that idea. I grew up thinking the night shift was just about silence, drunk people, and those running late in life. And for a long time, that's exactly what it was. Working as a fare collector on Route 307N, the late night line crossing from the industrial areas to the edge of town became routine. The smell of diesel, the hiss of the pneumatic doors, the rhythmic sway through turns. My life was a cycle of counted change, quick chats with drivers and half sleep between stops. But then, something started to bother me. Something small at first, barely noticeable. Always around 3 in the morning, exactly 3, I began to notice a group getting on the bus. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Factory workers, maybe? But slowly, the details started showing. They got on in complete silence. 5, sometimes 6 people, never speaking to each other. Their clothes, strange, like they'd stepped out of an old black and white photo from the 70s or earlier. Heavy coats, wide-brimmed hats, faded dresses, and the weirdest part, no one ever paid the fare. I'd always try the usual. Good evening. Fare, please? Nothing. They just stared forward, with pale, almost grayish faces, like they were covered in a thin layer of dust. Their eyes vacant, fixed on something I could never quite figure out. I started asking the driver about it, but he always dodged the question. A quiet man, long time on the job. Night people are just like that, he'd say. But the more the nights passed, the more I noticed a pattern. They always boarded at the same stop, a dimly lit street near an empty lot, a place that, honestly, I'd never paid attention to during the day. And there was another thing. The air inside the bus changed when they got on. A smell, like wet newspaper or old wood. A coldness that seemed to seep through the windows, even on sticky summer nights. I started avoiding looking at them, but it was like they knew. Every night, whenever I tried to ignore them, I could feel their eyes fixed on me, even if my head was turned away. One night, about a week after I really started paying attention, I swear I heard something. As the bus rolled along, someone or something whispered my name. Low, dragging. Lucas? I whipped around, but they were all the same as always. Still, motionless, staring at nothing. That's when I decided. The next night I was going to get to the bottom of this. I was going to ask the driver, and he'd have to answer me. The following night, I went to work with my heart heavy, like I knew I was heading toward a truth I'd rather not uncover. My body followed the usual routine. Wrinkled uniform, stale coffee, coins neatly stacked in my pouch. But my head was spinning with thoughts of those pale figures. Before leaving home, my mom, not knowing anything, still threw one of her usual phrases at me, the kind she'd always say when I complained about working the night shift. Those who challenge the night come back with the night inside them. She said she heard it from my grandma, and my grandma swore it was something old from back when she lived on a farm in Georgia. I never paid much attention until now. That night, the bus already felt different before I even turned the key. A strange silence, like the whole frame was holding its breath. For the first few hours, everything went on as usual. Regular passengers, sleepy workers, Couples arguing in hushed tones, people with earbuds. The kind of loneliness I already knew well. But as the clock ticked closer to 3, my chest started to tighten. The streets grew emptier. The engine sounded louder. And each stop seemed to last a few seconds longer than normal. And then, there it was. The same empty lot. The same flickering yellow street lamp shaking on the pole. And them, appearing just like always. First the man in the trench coat, then the woman in the long dress, and the others behind, stepping from the shadows like they grew from the ground. This time I stood right by the fare box, waited for the last of them to board, and with the firmest voice I could manage, I faced the driver. "Hey, can I talk to you? Now." He gave me that sideways glance, tired, like he'd known I'd ask this sooner or later. He didn't stop the bus, didn't take his hands off the wheel. "You already know what you're going to ask," he said, low and raspy. "Why?" My throat caught. "Why do you stop at that lot every night, if they never pay? Who are those people?" He took a deep breath, took a while to answer. "This route belongs to them. Always has." The way he said it, like a sentence, sent a chill from my head to my toes. My mind scrambled for a logical explanation. A prank? A hallucination? Some weird tradition among veteran drivers? But something deep inside me already knew it wasn't any of that. "What do you mean, it's theirs? What kind of answer is that?" My voice came out louder than I meant. A few of the other passengers, the living, breathing, normal ones, looked around, startled. But them, the usual ones, the pale ones, didn't move. That's when I decided I was getting off. I wasn't staying on this bus. Next stop, I'd get out. Simple as that. But when the next stop came, the bus didn't stop. I pulled the cord twice, 3 times. The bell chimed, but the driver kept staring ahead, like he was hypnotized. "Hey, why didn't you stop?" I yelled. He only muttered, "It's too late now." What did he mean by that? I looked out the window. The streets weren't the same anymore. No corner looked familiar. The route felt twisted. Old, rundown houses I'd never seen. Streetlights without bulbs. Cracked sidewalks. Like we were driving through a part of the city that didn't exist during the day. The other normal passengers started noticing too. An elderly woman stood up, asking loudly if we were off route. A young guy came up to me scared. "Dude, where the hell are we? Why isn't he stopping?" I had no answer. The living were panicking. The others stayed still, but something in them began to change. First it was the smell, that same rotten wood scent, but stronger now, like years of trapped dampness. Then the movements, small, subtle, but there. Hands trembling slightly, necks turning a few degrees more than natural, like their bones were made of rubber. I was shaking. The coins in my pouch rattled with the bus's jolts, but the sound felt muffled, distant. "Stop this bus!" someone shouted from the back, but the driver kept his eyes locked on the road, hands gripping the wheel. And then, after what felt like hours, the bus turned down a street I swear on everything sacred never existed in that neighborhood. The pavement ended. We drove onto dirt, full of potholes, the bus rocking violently, until the headlights lit up something that made me forget to breathe. A terminal, or what was left of one. Rusty metal structures, fallen signs, broken benches, weeds growing everywhere. The entrance sign, crooked, barely readable, but I could make out enough. Santa Helena Terminal. My blood froze. Santa Helena had been shut down over 20 years ago, after a fire that killed dozens. My grandparents talked about that place like it was cursed, said no one went near it, not even during the day. The bus stopped, engine off, silence. The normal passengers started standing up in panic, but the pale ones, they stood too. For the first time in all those nights, they broke their stillness. They turned, all at the same time. Their eyes now black, hollow, like their faces were just poorly fitted masks. And they started coming toward me. They came, those pale figures with dark, empty eyes, now moving strangely, almost floating, as the abandoned terminal exhaled a heavy, suffocating silence. The air froze around me, each of their steps making the ground shake inside my mind. I wanted to run, scream, do anything to escape, but I was paralyzed like an invisible force pinned me to my seat. My hands were cold and sweaty, and the sound of the dead engine echoed in the hollow space. That's when suddenly the driver, the same calm driver who had spoken with such heavy quietness all night, broke the silence. They were never regular passengers. They're the first ones, the soul of this route, the essence of the night. I looked at him. He seemed older now, eyes tired, full of sorrow. "I don't understand," I managed, fighting for air. "This line," and he continued, "wasn't made for carrying people or for collecting stories. It was made to carry those stuck in time, the ones who couldn't leave and who come back every night at 3 to remember and to keep alive the memory of the tragedy that happened here." My mind flashed back to the stories I'd heard as a kid, told by my grandparents. Stories of accidents, fires, mysterious disappearances. The legend of Santa Helena Terminal had always been surrounded by fear and respect, a place nobody dared mention after dark. The driver went on. "Over 20 years ago, a bus caught fire here. No one survived. All these people you see, they're the passengers from that night, lost, trapped, trying to get home. But the bus you're on isn't just a vehicle. It's a link, a passageway." A lump rose in my throat. It hit me. They weren't ghosts in the usual sense. They were fragments of a tragedy that refused to be forgotten. Pieces of broken stories, waiting for someone to tell the truth. Suddenly, one of them, the man in the trench coat, stopped just a few feet from me. His pale face seemed more real than ever. His eyes, once empty, now overflowed with a sadness that cut through my chest. And then he spoke, not aloud, but straight into my mind. "Remember us. Tell our story, so no one else disappears into the night." The bus seemed to vibrate like it was alive, and the fog outside began to lift, revealing familiar city streets once again. The driver turned to me like handing me a burden I'd carry forever. "Now you know, and this line, it's our connection. You can choose to keep collecting fares, or you can choose to be the guardian of these stories." When the bus finally reached the next stop, the air grew warm again, and the pale passengers vanished, like they were never there. I stepped off, body heavy, mind full of questions, and answers no one else would dare to tell. Since that night, I still work the 307N, not just as a fare collector, but as a guardian. Every time I pass the stop near the old Santa Helena terminal, I feel the weight of those empty eyes. Eyes that no longer scare me, but ask me to remember, to preserve. And so the city stays alive, and the night route keeps running, carrying more than passengers, carrying memories that must never fade in the silence of the midnight hour. Some stories never have clear answers, and that's perhaps what scares us the most. To hear more stories like this, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and get ready for the next story.